Hello, Craig Smith from the Home Education Foundation in Palmerston North, New Zealand. We're talking here about how we can educate our children at home. One question that sometimes comes up among homeschooling support groups is, well, what are some of the positives and negatives about field trips? Well, that's a really good question. Now, field trips, what it is, of course, is one family or a couple of families will get together and organize maybe even a couple of buses to take a whole swag of home-educated kiddies on some kind of field trip to another town to visit a museum or some event or whatever it might be. Well, now, some of the negatives about this, of course, is the logistics of it. It's often quite expensive, and it's often quite a hassle to organize quite a large number of children. And of course, once you start going down that road, you're going down this very same road you were hoping to avoid when you decided to educate your children at home in the first place. You didn't want all these, have things where you had large numbers of similarly aged kids all working together. I mean, all the field trips I've ever been to with a whole swag of 9-year-olds all wanting to look at the same museum exhibit at the same time. Well, no, they couldn't handle it. They couldn't all read the things. They couldn't all interact with the same interactive displays. They all wanted to at the same time, but the logistics, you just can't do it. And of course, you get a whole bunch of 9-year-olds together or a whole bunch of 8-year-olds together. Well, they start revving each other up and they start pushing each other around, bullying one another, teasing one another, and then you just right down that whole row you didn't want to go to. And especially if it's in a public place like a museum or a public show of some kind where we've been invited as home educators to come and observe this show or this stage play, and you got front row seats, and so the manager has come to explain a little bit about how the stage show works and the lighting and stuff, and the kids will start revving each other up. They get a reputation then for being rude and discourteous to the person who is running the show. And it's not that the children necessarily were trying to be rude or discourteous, it's just that you get a whole bunch of 9-year-olds together and they just rev each other up. And so you got to watch all that. So watch out for your field trips. Plan them carefully. I mean, they can be profitable, but most of the time, the ones I've been to, I have to say they've been quite unprofitable. And most of the time, they've actually been quite counterproductive, if you want my opinion for it. They'll be sad to say there are certain families, if you're in a big support group, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Whenever you're thinking about a field trip, there are certain families you want to have a chat to about. They may want to reconsider whether they're going to come or not, or if they do, whether they're going to bring little Johnny. Maybe little Johnny could stay behind, or maybe Big Brother Billy could walk around with his arms firmly clasped around little Johnny, because little Johnny has these hands that just are out touching everything, and he just can't keep them to himself. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. You want to, especially if you're going out and do it public, to the zoo or museum, you want your home education group to make a good impression, not a negative impression. So coach all your families and coach the children in particular about what are the expected standards of behavior. You want to be very clear about this, and especially all those who are in charge of the home education support group, because if you manage to get permission to go to a certain place, or if you wangle an invitation, you want it to be a good experience for everybody. And of course you want to have an open invitation to come back sometime in the future. And so you need to make it very clear about what are the standards of behavior. Make those very clear to everybody before you go on the field trip, before you even start. If there's any kind of transportation involved, like a bus trip, and there's money that needs to be paid, it's got to be paid up front, in advance, so that there's no harsh feelings about it later on. And of course, if you're in a bus or something, the children again have to understand you don't bring your ice cream cones and smear them all over the upholstery. No, you don't do that. And you're smearing your chocolate all up and down the windows. No. They got to understand these things, and don't stuff your gum wrappers down between the upholstery. again, just you gotta sometimes just explain these things to the young people, because if they think, oh, it's a public bus, or if it's a big bus and there's lots of us on here, it's kind of open slather, I can do what I like. No. Again, try to think through and think ahead. So watch out for these field trips. They're really I've never known a field trip to measure up to what it really was supposed to have done. Occasionally I've been to one that went to a zoo that was pretty good, because the zoos are pretty good deals, really. But think them through carefully. But do understand that often a field trip, you're just buying into a lot of logistical problems that you're trying to get away from when you decide to home educate in the first place. Thanks very much.